Due to the somewhat recent release of Alan Wake 2, I wanted to revisit and explore one of the most influential and iconic Xbox 360 games, with its majestic and beautiful environment, captivating story, and engaging gameplay. Today, we will be talking about Alan Wake. Alan Wake was released back on the 14th of May 2010 by Remedy Entertainment. If this game studio sounds familiar, it's probably because they're the same people who made the Max Payne franchise, a little indie game franchise about a guy going around shooting druggies in slow motion. So after developing the original Max Payne in 2001 and Max Payne 2 in 2003, Remedy wanted to move away from the Max Payne franchise and try something new. They wanted to create a game trying to tell a deeper narrative story than Max Payne. The inspiration for this game came heavily from Stephen King and David Lynch's Twin Peaks. Knowing that, we can see how similar the two bodies of work are. The development of this game was actually quite rough. Remedy struggled with merging the promised open-world survival gameplay and story, which was further complicated by Microsoft's involvement and suggestions for improvement, which Sam Lake, the creative director of the studio, compared it to a quote-unquote too many cooks situation. They started missing publisher milestones as they tried various changes to the open world format with no clear resolution. Roughly 3 years into development, the team recognized they needed to stop and refocus on what the core elements of the gameplay were to be. So after 2 months of constant collaboration, the team finally created and revised the gameplay loop that we know and love today. The story format is taken up almost as a thriller television series. There are 6 episodes, each ending with either a cliffhanger or some sort of twist. It's a very unique take that I don't think I've ever seen in a video game before. We can also see the inspiration taken from Twin Peaks. The game follows a man named Alan Wake. Alan is a really famous crime fiction author. By famous, I mean like megastar famous. Despite all of this fortune, Alan has been suffering from a writer's block for over 2 years and hasn't released anything new. He and his wife Alice decided to go to a small town by the name of Bright Falls in Washington for a nice vacation to clear their heads. His wife rents a beautiful cabin in the middle of Cauldron Lake that isn't cursed or will fuck with Alan in any way. Despite all of this good, Alan finds out that Alice had been planning to get Alan back to writing during this vacation, as she set up a quiet working room and a typewriter just for him. How sweet. Alan does not indeed find this sweet, and he storms out of the house as he wants to forget about the writer's block. He realizes that he fucked up by leaving his wife after he hears her screaming for help. He returns to find her being dragged to the bottom of the lake by some sort of mysterious force. Now I will never understand Alan's train of thought as he decides to dive into the water, like his scrawny ass will be able to do anything. Alan blacks out and wakes up a whole week later, apparently having driven his car off a road and crashed it, with no memory of how he got there. Alan starts making his way through the woods when he gets attacked by some sort of psycho-possessed people. The psychos are named Taken, which I'll explain later. Alan figures out that these Taken can be defeated via light, so his big brain ass uses a flashlight to decimate them. It's safe to say that since these possessed humans get destroyed by light, they must have something to do with darkness. While he continues plowing through the Taken,
Pause! What?
He finds mysterious pages of a manuscript scattered throughout. He recognizes it as his writing and notices that the events in the script are happening in real life. it describes everything he has experienced so far, real freaky. This sets the scene for the rest of the game, where Alan explores Bright Falls trying to figure out this mystery and save his wife from whoever took her. A really cool feature the devs added was the manuscript pages. They aren't just some simple collectibles you can get, but each page that you collect you can actually read. The page basically tells you what will happen real soon, which adds an interesting dilemma for the player of choosing to either experience the game truly without any quote-unquote spoilers, or to give yourself a little sneak peek into what will happen so you can get ready. Reading the pages has advantages like being prepared to fight enemies or even instructions on how to fight enemies that you haven't even encountered yet. I remember that one of the notes I read early on taught me how to fight against the bird flocks, which helped me later on throughout the game. Throughout the story, he finds out that he was trapped inside the cabin in an alternate dimension under the lake by the Dark Presence, which was the evil force of darkness I was hinting at in the beginning. Alan was forced to write the manuscript while Alice was held hostage by the Presence. Now hold on, this will get a bit fucked. Basically, the Dark Presence enters the world by turning fiction into reality. This explains why Alan's manuscript that he wrote was turning into reality. Thomas Zane was the entity's first victim. Thomas Zane was also a writer who in the 1970s also had his wife taken away from him. So he wrote a manuscript for the entity to be reunited with his wife, Barbara. You still following me? Thomas successfully trapped the darkness by causing a volcanic eruption that sank his cabin. Alan dives back into the dimension to kill the entity by flashing light on it and rewriting the ending of his manuscript so that his wife Alice is freed while he is locked in the dimension, sacrificing himself. And that's pretty much it. It's a really complicated and long story to follow, but truly one of the most unique I have ever experienced in a video game. If you played this game and understood the story fully without watching or reading any quote-unquote story explained videos, I applaud you. Despite the complexity of the story, it definitely kept me engaged and at the edge of my seat, wanting to see what would happen next. Even though Alan Wake focuses more on setting the mood and engaging the player in the story, the gameplay is also very fun. The main loop is nothing crazy, with Alan going through hordes of different enemies. The interesting part is how Alan deals with the enemies. Regularly shooting the Taken with guns won't do anything to them. To actually hurt them and to make them vulnerable, Alan needs to use his flashlight. He needs to stun any enemy with his flashlight before he can kill them by shooting them. The tricky part is that each enemy type has different amounts of time that they need to be stunned. For example, the big brute guys take a really long time to stun and lots of bullets to kill, but they are slow as fuck. In contrast, there are these little fast motherfuckers that take like a second to stun and 2 handgun bullets to kill. It isn't as simple as just whipping out your flashlight and gliding it over them, but you need to actually hold it on them for a few seconds, which creates a lot of awkward situations. It actually took me more than half of the game to fully understand how the combat works. So for the first half, I was just emptying all my bullets into one enemy without fully stunning them and not understanding why they wouldn't die. On the topic of enemies, I really like that there are actually multiple enemy types, each with its own attributes. For example, as I mentioned before, there are the brutes that are there just to eat your bullets up, the axe throwers that just keep lobbing axes at you like Kobe hitting deep threes.
Here's Kobe, way outside. How about that shot? Kobe Bryant puts it up, beauty.
And many others. Aside from the Taken, there are other enemies. One of the most interesting but annoying are the possessed items. What I mean is literally anything ranging from a barrel, fridge, sheet of metal, or a fucking tractor could be possessed by the Dark Presence and attack you. Most of these items just fling themselves at you, so it's pretty easy to defeat them by just flashing them with a flashlight. However, there are multiple boss fights like the aforementioned tractor that are not as easy to defeat. One thing I really like about this game is the gun variety. Although the combat gets pretty stale after a while, the vast range of weapons definitely helps. There are the basic weapons like pistols, shotguns, and hunting rifles, but also more overpowered and fun weapons like the flare gun and flashbangs that are meant to get you out of really bad situations, since you are overrun by enemies very often. Despite all of these various guns, one thing I really didn't like about this game is the fact that in a lot of combat situations, there are so many enemies, especially on hard mode, that you literally don't have enough bullets and resources to fight them. I cannot even count how many encounters I had with enemies where I would just have to keep flashlight stunning them over and over again while running away, cause I literally didn't have any bullets. It made me feel like such a wimp. Another really annoying thing that kept happening was the game kept taking away my weapons non-stop. This wasn't like a glitch or anything, but like every hour or so, due to the story plot and events happening, the game would basically strip you naked and force you to recollect and scavenge all of your weapons. This was hella annoying, as I kept having to play the game basically without any weapons. The game does have other unique features aside from the combat. One of the things I really liked was the healing mechanic of the light post. Basically, in certain areas you can find safe havens, which is just a light post. But since the Taken are made of darkness, they can't step inside the light. So the safe havens are like bonfires from Dark Souls, as stepping inside will give you a checkpoint and even heal you. These safe havens are pretty rare to find, so when you do come across one, it really does bring a smile to your face. Truly one of the most beautiful parts of this game is the environment and atmosphere. On its own, the graphics, models, and setting are very impressive, but knowing that this game was initially released on the Xbox 360 makes it even more impressive. Let's start with the environment. The game takes place in Bright Falls, which is a small mining town in Washington. Nothing impressive or unique there. The true beauty is the nature. The whole city is surrounded by and engulfed by dense forests, trees, and nature. This is another reason why the city feels so ominous and secluded. There is no escape from it, and it makes you feel isolated. The isolation is also amplified by the fact that 95% of the game takes place in the complete darkness of nighttime. While playing, I noticed that I only really felt safe seeing what was in front of me, in the radius of the flashlight beam, but I was always afraid and anxious of what could be behind me, in the darkness. Even though most of the game takes place in forests, you do get to explore the city itself. It does feel like one of those stereotypical small American cities with a population that I could count on my fingers. There are the classic storefronts, churches, police stations, and many others that add to the charm. It's a really cozy city, aside from the possessed people running around and trying to kill you. Although there isn't too much variety in the environment, it does not take away from the beauty and immersion. This might sound like a cope, but sometimes less is more. Surprisingly, the characters do add a lot to both the story and atmosphere. There are dozens of different characters that you meet throughout the game, each being exaggerated and flamboyant. This is done mainly through their voice acting and dialogue. I really wanna praise the voice acting, as it's one of the best I've seen in a game. Even though some characters are written to be pretty dull and unimportant to the plot, the voice acting brings life to them and gives them an identity to remember even after finishing the game. It's all very professional and fitting for each character. After the release, the game was met with very positive reviews. Most people praised it for its atmospheric storytelling, psychological horror elements, and innovative use of light as a gameplay mechanic. Other things like the game's episodic structure, reminiscent of a TV series, contributed to its distinctive charm. However, of course, the game did have flaws. Critiques directed their criticisms at the occasionally repetitive gameplay mechanics and linear level design, while others also criticized the quality of the facial animations and the relatively short length of the game. A few examples of the reviews are IGN's 9 out of 10, Metacritic's 83 out of 100, and GameSpot's 8.5 out of 10. It also won several awards, including IGN's Best Xbox 360 Game of 2010 in the horror game category, and GameSpot's Best of 2010 for the category of Best Original IP. Overall, people held this game as a very unique and engaging horror experience. Alan Wake is not only one of the best Xbox 360 horror games, but one of the best of the decade. Although it lacks in certain areas like repetitive gameplay, it rewards the player's patience with a stunning environment and an engaging and immersive story. If you haven't ever played this game, do yourself a favor and check it out. Just buy the remastered version, not the original version. Thank you for watching today's video.